This video series is presented by SharePoint Journey School. If you want to watch more these videos, you can go to SharePoint Journey School here and click on Enroll Now button, or you can go to one of our free courses, which is SharePoint Designer Workflows, SharePoint Fundamentals mini course, or Get Started with SharePoint Online Development. You can enroll in one of these free courses to learn more about SharePoint. In this video, you learn how to add columns, work with columns in modern document library. So here we have modern invoices, and by default we have 3 columns which are available. One is name, the other one is modified, and the last one is modified by. Those are the 3 columns that we have. So what we are going to do is we will be adding a few more columns to this particular document library, and we will see how we could add those columns. So we have that plus sign where we have different options where I can click on single line of text, multiple lines of text, different types of fields, and the number, person, date. If I want additional data types, I can click on more. So here I'm gonna add some of those metadata that is required for the invoices. Example, the customer code. So I'm just adding one of the field here. So when I'm adding the columns, I'm not using any spaces. So that way the internal name will be the same. So once I create the columns, I can see different settings are available. I can filter it, or I can group by that particular column. Now you can see that it shows unassigned 14 because that column doesn't have value. And also if I go to the additional column settings, I can still add columns, and there are a few more options, like I can rename the column. So when I select rename, and I can add the space and save it. That's how I could rename the column value as well. And there are additional columns that I can do: show, hide, move, left, and all those things. We'll see those things as well. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a few more columns that are required for invoice management within this modern invoices document library. So let's add one more column here. I'm going to call this as customer reference. So this will have a customer reference value, which is a single line of text. And this one also have the similar kind of settings. The customer reference, if I want, I can just group by, or I can filter by using customer reference. So automatically the group by will change. So let's go ahead and add a few more columns. So here I'll say invoice number, which is again a single line of text, so it will have the text as well. And we have added 3 columns. So we will add one more column called invoice date, which is of type date column. So here I'll enter invoice date. Again, if you observe all these columns while I'm creating, I'm not using any spaces between these columns, column names. So we have customer code, customer reference, invoice number, and invoice date. I want invoice total as well. But if I look at the columns which are available here, I don't have currency field. So if I want the currency field, I have to click on more here. So which will take me to create column option from the settings. So here I will enter invoice total, and this will be a currency type. So once I select the currency type, the settings below will change, and here I'm going to make this mandatory, and the format will leave this as United States, and click OK. Now it got created, the new column, which is a currency type. So there you can see that we have a new column that got created. So in this particular view, if you see, I have only 2 columns. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more view where I can have all the columns that I have added within that view. So to do that, here I'll go to the views and click on manage views, and it will redirect the settings page here. So once I go to the views, I'll create a view. I'm going to create a standard view here, and I'm going to name this one as invoices, and I'm going to make this as a default view as well. And once I scroll down, I have the columns that I can show it within this view. So I'm going to select the customer reference and the invoice date invoice number, those columns that I wanted to show within this view. So let's go ahead and select invoice date as well. So once I select here, and I'm gonna click OK, which will create a new view. I'm just leaving the other settings, but if you want to make changes to the other settings within the view, you can always change that. So here you can see that I have the additional columns that are available along with the name modified by. We have customer code, invoice total, customer reference, invoice date, and invoice number. So all these columns are there within this particular view. And I don't want modified and modified by within this view. So if I want to make change, I can again go back to the manage views and select invoices. And I'm just showing you the traditional way, but I'll be showing you how you could do this in the modern libraries directly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just rearrange these modified and modified by so that it will show at the end rather than showing at the beginning. So there you can see that I have modified and modified by moved to the top rights or right hand side. Now you have these customer code and invoice total. Now for example, you want to move this customer code towards the right side. I can always do that. So I can just move left or move right. So if I click on move right, this column will move to the right hand side and invoice total will show up before that. And I can sort the information. As of now, this document library doesn't have the metadata for invoice total. But what I can do is I can always sort the data that is available here. And I can also rename these columns directly from here. Or I can move the columns from right to left, left to right, and all those things. So now I was trying to move that column towards the right hand side of all those columns. So now when I say move right, now you can see that invoice total is showing at the end. I don't have to do the rearrangement, so I can just move these columns within the library itself or the view itself. And also, if I don't want some of these columns, I can check or uncheck from the columns itself. So now here I don't want modified and modified by, so I'm just unchecking those columns and I'm gonna just click on apply. Automatically the view will get modified here itself. And also there you can see that for the individual columns also I can make the changes. Again, if I go to the add column option, I can create it. That's we have already seen, right? And look at the view itself, which is, before going to that, if I wanted to hide, I can just hide that particular column, right? Or I can show, if I want to show, I can go back again and I can check that column and apply it. It's pretty easy to make those changes to the view from the view itself. And I can rename these columns. So let's go ahead and rename all these columns with the spaces so that it is more readable. So I'm just adding the space between invoice date and invoice total. So when you are renaming these columns, it changes only the display name and doesn't change the internal name. So I'll show you once we go to the column settings within the library itself. So you can still see the internal name of these columns doesn't change. I made all these changes. Now we have updated internal names, the display names. So there you can see the invoices showing that it's modified. So you can always save the view. When you are clicking on save the view, you can modify the view name also if you want, but I'm just leaving as it is in this case. So now we have updated the view and we have modified the display name of these columns. So what we are going to do now is I'm going to go to the list settings. Now I wanted to make some of these columns as mandatory. So I can select the particular column. In the bottom you can see that the customer reference doesn't show the space. So the internal name still stays the same even if I modified from the modern library view. It's the same for invoice date or customer code, whatever the fields that we have updated. Now
if I want to make this mandatory, I have to go to the column settings and do it. I can't do directly from the view. So what I'm going to do now is I'm making all these columns as mandatory. So I'll select invoice number now. I'm going to say required that this column need information. So I'm changing for all of them. So all of them now becomes mandatory. So in this particular video so far, we have seen how to create columns, right, from the view itself, how to create a new view, and how to modify the view, how to rearrange the columns, how to update the display name of these columns, how to make these columns as mandatory. And from the view itself, we saw how we could make, show, hide, or move these columns to the right and left without going to the library settings, and even how we could hide these columns, how we could show these columns, like adding those columns directly from the view context itself. And these are some of the new features that are available in Modern Document Library. So what I would suggest for you is, now the action item would be go ahead and add similar set of columns if you don't find any new columns, and just look at this video and go ahead different types of columns within your document library and make those changes to those columns that you are going to add, as well as create the views, modify those columns within the view, save it, make them, some of them as mandatory. So these are the action items after watching this video. So once you practice those things, then you will be more comfortable on how to create those columns and how to use them within Modern Document Library.
To watch more videos, don't forget to enroll in SharePointJourney.com.